From the University of California, Irvine, this is UCI Minds Spotlight on Care, the podcast where we share stories, experiences, tips, and advice on caring for loved ones affected by Alzheimer's and other dementias. Hello, welcome to Spotlight on Care. And we have an exciting podcast today. Our topic is going to be personality issues, as well as some of the related medications that people have had to use when one of their loved ones is acting out. So I'm going to throw it to my co-host, Virginia, here, and have her tell a little bit about her experience in this area. And then I'll come back and then I'll introduce our special guest.
Okay, be happy to, Steve. Mom's assisted living facility had a policy where if somebody passed out, 911 was called. Didn't matter what the reason was, if they knew it or they didn't know it, 911 was called. So occasionally, whether it be dehydration or whatever issue, they would have to call 911 after Mom passed out. And before you'd know it, an ambulance would drive up in the front and they would gurney her out to the ambulance, off to the hospital. So I would meet her there. And, then there's the wait in the waiting room. And then there's the exam. These things turned my mom upside down. I got so that I would dread the call that Mom had gone off to the emergency room in an ambulance. And it did happen. So she would come home and be absolutely upside down, anxious, nervous, combative. There was one time she even got written up for hitting a woman in her arm, and she made a bruise on her arm. This was not my mother, my mother's personality at all. So the doctor would give her a low dose of Seroquel after a while. And I think at one time he tried Risperdal. It calmed her. It just made all of those really hard symptoms that she would get, it just made them go away. And she slept well and she's happy. And I thought, I hate to see her on heavy medications, but you know what? For us, in that circumstance, it worked. So we were happy about that.
Oh, that's a good story, Virginia. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think we all have this experience as our loved ones start to change and react to the disease and fight against it almost as if it's a person. And I think that's what's happening sometimes with these personality issues is the loved one is just doing whatever they can to fight against the change that's occurring in their body. In my case with Patty, we were lucky enough to do early diagnosis. So her acceptance of the disease was really very good. And she did not fight attending doctor visits or things like that. But a real change happened when we shifted into the community, when it became apparent that, the home care that I had wasn't enough for her and the stress of my business travel, et cetera, wasn't working for me. So when Patty went into the community, that's when the change happened. She really fought against, and you may experience this yourself, any change where she's no longer in, her home that she's known, or at least in my case, Patty's home that she'd known for so long. She fought against wanting to leave. And so there were some issues about her wanting to leave the location, even struggling with the person who was monitoring the front door. No hitting, fortunately, or any other type of activity, just a struggle. And I didn't have to put her on any medication, and she was able to move ahead. So it is a challenge. And of course, this is probably giving you some idea of what our topic is going to be today, which is personality issues. And our special guest today is Denny Barker. Denny has been a resident of Orange County for a number of years. He's been a pillar in the dental surgery industry for a number of years as well. And he and his wife, Kay, worked the journey together. And so I'd like to introduce Denny today and start off by having him tell a little background on his relationship with Kay and what a loving, wife and mother she was.
Okay, Steve. Actually, I met Kay in 7th grade, and we went through high school together. I didn't date her. She was a year ahead of me. Dating older women was, of course, very cool, but that happened about my senior year. So anyway, after that, we did get married as I was entering dental school after 4 years of undergraduate. And so when I finished the dental school, we came to California. I was in the Navy. We came out here. So we were, at the time, when she passed away, we'd been married 58 years. So we'd been a long time together. But she was fine until about 2010. The kids started noticing. My 2 daughters actually probably picked it up before I did. I was with her all the time, didn't think too much about, missed chances or missed conversations where she couldn't get her facts straight because I was having problems at times too. So anyway, so the kids came to me and said, "Dad, I think there's something wrong with Mom." And I kind of started watching for it. And so at that point, thanks to Steve, he and I had talked, and Keith Swain, who is another friend, put me in touch with a Dr. Betsy Parker, I think was her name at that time. She was a psychologist at UCI. So we went in 2010 and had extensive tests done on Kay. And of course found out she had mild cognitive impairment, at which point, and she knew it. So we put her on coconut oil and a number of other things that would try to slow this down. So for about 5 years, it was really pretty good. And she knew she had it. She was not really upset about it. She was upset. I mean, she just said, "I can't believe I'm losing my mind." She was director of women's ministries in our church. She'd written 5 10-week Bible studies. She wasn't exactly a sit-around person. And she never did any of it until after the kids were out of school and out of the house. So she was an ideal mother as well. And but when that started, then all of a sudden, I think if you've been there, you know that suddenly it becomes more involved in terms of watching her and taking care of her. She was amazing, though. She would say, "Dad, honey, I'm not going to go up to the mall anymore. That's too far to drive." And then the next thing was, "I'm not going to leave Pico and San Clemente. I'm just going to drive around here." And she took it right down to finally right around town and right around us, at which point she ended up having a knee replacement, and that sort of stopped everything dead. So from that, she ended up just really walking the dog around the neighborhood, which was fine. And she came home one day and said, "I'm not leaving this neighborhood," because we were in a kind of a private community. She said, I got out on the main street and I got lost. So I said, "Well, that's good, honey, don't." And so the neighbors all by this time had picked up on it, and she would tell people that she had a problem with her memory. So at that point, I thought, well, I'll take her over to this one particular care facility that had a pretty good reputation in our area, and I walked her through it. And she got a great tour through it, and she said, "Gee, this is wonderful. This is really nice." And I thought, "Oh, wow, we're getting somewhere here." And she came out and she started to cry, and she said, "You're going to put me in here, aren't you?" And I said, "No, honey, we're going to go down to the harbor and have lunch." Well, from that point on, every time something came up, she'd say, "Yeah, you're going to put me in there now, aren't you?" And so we really got along quite well. I had a business relationship with another friend of mine in a Toyota dealership, and he and his wife hired a limo for a last Christmas party we went to. And Kay sat with Nancy and talked, and they carried on a great conversation. And Nancy, when it was over, said, "I can't believe it. She doesn't act like anything's even wrong." Came home, then it was Christmas, and after Christmas, right around the middle of January, she came out one day and she said, "Honey, I don't know who I am. Where am I?" And and I'd already called this memory care facility and put in the order for a reservation. Unfortunately, one opened up. So because of the way she and I had that experience, I just couldn't bring myself to take her. So my daughter, bless her heart, and her son took her. So they got right to the door, right to the stoplight across the street from this facility. And she was hoping she'd shoot the light and get through it. And she was going to use the excuse that she's a singer and caroling at Christmas time, and she wanted to interview and see if she could get a job there. So about that same time, the light turned red. And so she sat there, and Kay looked at it, and she said, I know this place. I've been here before. And so when Kristen pulled in, Kay said, I think I'll go in with you. Well, I mean, it couldn't have worked out any better. We got in there, and Mandy said, oh, hi, Kay, come on in, and took her back and turned around to Kristen and said, you want to stick around? She said, nope. So they left, and of course, the way this facility works, they keep you away for at least a week or two. And I did, but she'd always come up the front and say, where's Denny? But from that point on, it was really pretty smooth. I mean, she went around, she walked around. I'd have lunch with her almost every day in there. And she'd say, how's the house? And I said, well, honey, you are home after a while, and not at first. And then I started getting, are you my husband? And then pretty soon it was, do you know where my husband is? I haven't seen him. And so I always say, hey, honey, I've got to go to work now, so that's why I'm leaving. And we got along real fine that way. And it really went fine until Memorial Day weekend. I don't remember how many years ago it was now, but I got a call at about 6 o'clock at night, 5 or 6 at night. And the lady said, and this is where I think there's a lesson here for sure. The lady said, caregiver said, we've got a problem here. I said, what's the problem? She said, well, Miss K just tried to strangle one of the patients that is in a wheelchair. And, you know, I kicked myself. I didn't say, is this the first time? Has she done this before? Is there anything else she's done? And then she said, oh, we got to move her out of here. We've got to put her in a psychiatric ward. And like an idiot, I should have immediately said, let me speak with the doctor. Don't put her in there. You can put her on some medication and sedate her and keep her there. But I didn't. So, and there was no opening in the psychiatric ward, so they moved her into the hospital for 2 days with 24/7 care, and that didn't come out of the insurance. So from there, she did go into the psychiatric unit, and the bad thing about that is that when I first went in there, Dr. Cruz had said to me, I hope you don't ever have to put her in there because this is a hellhole. And well, in she went, and I'll tell you what, it was a hellhole, and it was terrible. Sad part is that by the time she got out of there and really got back to the memory care facility, she no longer walked. She was in a wheelchair, really slightly no cognitive understanding at all anymore. So she really lost her ability to even hardly speak. So that was a real jolt, and one I took myself for in many ways, that I didn't just keep her there.
Let's go back and talk about what occurred, and when Kay was transferred to the facility, did they call you? What was the contact that you had with the psychiatric service?
Still, it was pretty light. It really was. I mean, they knew she was in there, but I had to hire a separate caregiver that would take care of her. There was no real emergency in her health, so when we finally got it, then they hired an ambulance to take her into this other psychiatric unit up in Newport Beach. So I didn't get a whole lot of conversation with anybody on that whole issue, except that I can recall. I mean, that was 4 years ago, and it's a lot of water's gone underneath the dam. And she went from there to another memory care facility in San Juan Capistrano, and from there she finally went back to the memory care, her own facility. So it was really kind of a whole long, arduous trip.
You said that the psychiatric facility wasn't a great experience. I won't quote what you said, but in essence, that's what you said. What was it like for you, and what could you see that was going on with Kay at that time, or did you even get a chance to see?
Well,
her?
I only went over it about twice because they didn't want you to go in. They really didn't want you there. But I did get in. I went in, and it was more like a motel. It wasn't really any kind of I'd call it a hospital. And it was just actually like I majored in psychology in undergrad, and would go over to the mental institutions in Kalamazoo. And most of them, they were just sitting around the hallway, in stupor. And that's kind of where Kay was and where everyone in there was. There was nobody really responding, they didn't appear to be doing anything other than just knock them out and let them sit there. And that's, I don't know, Ginny, do you relate to that at all? Okay, well, it was not good. And I would just say for anyone that goes through this, remember, she is your wife or your husband. You have the say. Don't listen to somebody and just say, oh yeah, okay, that's fine. Then I'll just put up with it. I want to talk to the doctor. I should have found out how many episodes she had like this. Is this the only one? Is there a way we can sedate her and keep her there and just calm her down? Because it might have been a one-time thing that just struck her wrong right there. I don't know. It never did. So by the time she got back, it was long gone.
Do you recall not necessarily the medications that Kay was on, but maybe what the medication process did?
Well, when she was at the memory care facility, it was mild, and she was really functioning quite well there. Once she went through the psychiatric thing, and when she came back, now we're talking about a whole totally different type of person. And she's in a wheelchair. They had to move her to the wheelchair, move her to bed, and move her back to the wheelchair. And you saw her at that time, Steve, when you were there too, that she just kind of became an object that they put in front of a TV set. She didn't know what it was, but she just sat there.
Was there any improvement whatsoever after she came back from the facility, from the medical
I don't
facility?
think so. Not that I saw anyway. And I would go in. I went in 3 times a week, and the kids would go in too, and they were saying the same thing. What did happen. There were some real changes that took place in that facility in the management and some ownership. So some things that really caused me some concern. And the kids started telling me, said, "Dad, they don't look like they're keeping her real clean now." And so I started kind of looking for that too. And so at that point, and this was probably 2.5 years ago, I decided it was time to move her. And so I moved her into a board and care place that had 6 ladies in it, and she got bathed every day. So I kind of followed that a lot closer, and I knew the owner there and spoke with her quite often about the whole situation. She was treated really quite well there. And of course, right then, a year ago, pandemic hit. She was in a lockdown, and I didn't see her for probably, I could look through the window at her, but I couldn't get into the facility. So I didn't get in and see her for probably 9-10 months.
Let's go back to that day, that fateful day when this all occurred. You said that you felt like you should have done some things, and you talked about that a little bit. But why do you feel that way now, Denny? I mean, it all happened in a few minutes, and you're kind of blaming yourself for that decision. But really, weren't you looking for advice and counsel? And do you think that really it was your mistake, or do you feel like you just didn't get what you should have done?
Well, I can't. You have a good point, Steve. I think there should have been a lot more concern on the other end of making sure that I was aware and what was going on and how I was handling it, and how are you doing in this? Are you okay with what we're going to do? And I got none of that. And I don't know that I shouldn't even use his name, but I don't know that the physician ever knew anything happened until she was gone, because it was on a Memorial Day weekend. He could have been out of town.
So you said a little bit about what you think the message is, which is a question about, you're still, even though you're in a community, you're still the primary caregiver. I think that's what you're saying. So maybe you talk a little bit more now how you feel about that responsibility.
It's so easy to look back and blame yourself or blame anybody, because when you're in the throes of that event and the emotions that are involved, you don't think that clearly. And that's probably the biggest problem. I try to keep the kids out of it because we had some issues there in the beginning of one daughter not really buying in that she was that sick or really needed to go in there. Of course, she wasn't around a lot. The other daughter had been around much more. She lived in the city, whereas Jenny lived outside the city and didn't get in as much. So, but it wasn't nearly as bad as our poor group. Steve knows more better than I, and I do too, that there were some in there that really had some tough times with their in-laws and their family regarding placing her in a memory care facility. So I did not get any of that. And when she went in, Jenny did accept it, and it wasn't long before Jenny saw it all and said, "Boy, I'm glad you did it, Dad." So it worked out.
What thoughts do you have, reflecting back on Kay and your time together? I remember you so vividly talking about the dinners and how she prepared everything. And, Then she would say, I'm going to go to bed. And it just seemed like she was this wonderful, even as she knew something was happening, but she worked very hard to still keep everything as much as she could around your house.
She did. And that was sort of how, as we got to our dinner time, all of a sudden, the salad didn't get made. And so I'd run in and make the salad. And of course, if the food had to be cooked, I was the one. And we didn't have a problem, thank God, with setting the house on fire or wandering out. She did not leave the house at night. When she went out, it was structured, and she knew when she could go out and when she couldn't. One night, she started sleeping in the kids' room because she felt like snored and kept her awake. But when she was in there, she'd come in and she'd say, honey, there's somebody at the door. They're coming in the front door right now. So she was getting hallucinations. And so I'd say, I'd get up and go in and look around. I say, oh, Denny, I think they've left. It's okay now. But then slowly, as I said, it just became at night, especially, it became so overwhelming for me that was about the time when I was getting exhausted trying to keep, make the food, buy the food, put it together, and then get her to bed after that. And usually it was about 6:30. She was ready to go to bed. And I'd come back out and have a glass of wine and sit down and just, crash. So, and even to this day, I find that I enjoy being alone at night and just having a glass of wine and making my own dinner and just enjoying the peace and quiet.
It's a great story that you have there, Denny. What about your thoughts as a caregiver in general? What do you think about being a caregiver and what it's meant to you?
It's a lot of work. I heard the sayings that caregivers often die before the patient does, and I can see why. Tremendous pressure, and it just isn't over because you're constantly on guard, looking around your corners and making sure that she's okay, making sure she's not getting out, doing all sorts of crazy things that she doesn't know she's doing. One time I bought her the medical alert or life alert system so that if she fell, she could push the button if she was cognizant enough to do so. And I came home one day about 2:00 in the afternoon, and she said, "Oh, there were some men here." And I said, "Did you let them in?" And she said, "Oh, yeah." And I thought, "Oh, brother." And so I said, "What do they do?" She said, "Oh, they just kind of looked around and then left." And I said, "Honey, you don't let strange men in the house." "Oh, they seem very nice." And it wasn't until the next day I happened to go outside, and the next door neighbor said, "Hey, did you know the fire truck was here yesterday? Was everything okay over there?" Well, what had happened is she apparently had pushed the button and didn't know it. And so they showed up, and they were just wanting to make sure she was okay. So they came in, looked around, and left. I never heard anything more about it, but so that was probably the funniest thing.
Another one of the stories, right? Another one of the stories. Yeah. I mean, I think we all go through this debate about caring for our loved ones. How do you feel today? Kay's passed away. How do you feel about the process and what you went through and the job you did?
I'd have to say I'm a Christian, and somehow it was like surreal that the Lord took me through that. I have to say it no other way, because it was just such a surreal experience of just kind of just taking it a day at a time and not even being able to feel. I was almost numb through the whole thing. And then all of a sudden at the end, it was just like, wow, what just happened? Where are we at? And it took, and she didn't pass away till February 2nd of this year. So fortunately, that last day, we were all able to, the kids and I were able to each one individually go in. We knew it was getting near the end. And so by this time, of course, the lockdown was over. So we each had half an hour to spend time with her alone. And it was a nice thing to be able to conclude it that way. It's gone so long now. We were talking over 10 years that it wasn't. It was emotional in some ways. It was very final. It was probably not as emotional as it was the day I put her into the memory care facility, but it kind of felt the same way too.
It sounds to me like you did an unbelievable job with her. Bless your heart. I always feel like it was quite a journey. And if I had it to do over again, I think I would be so much better. Listening to these stories reminds me of so many things. And I think, I wish I'd known that then. I could have been so much better And I don't have that opportunity. I miss my mom every
I understand
day.
that one too. It is final because the death is so final. But as I said, I have the hope that I'm going to see her again someday. And so that meant a lot to me personally. I hope it does to you too. But it's what it is. And Steve's been, now Steve's kidding me. Oh, I've got someone I'd like you to meet.
Well, that's another interview. Don't worry about that. That'll be a different
I'm kidding, Steve, on this one because
we'll talk about the life after again.
I had to let you in just slightly here.
Yeah. Well, I think I want to echo, Denny, thank you so much. And I also want to echo, Virginia's comment. I, of course, was with you via phone and in person while you were going through this difficult time. And I could see the pain that you felt at that juncture. And I think it's important for our listeners to understand that you can think everything's moving along just fine and that everything's under control. And then out of nowhere, something strange happens. Yeah. And you're put in a position that you hadn't prepared for, that nobody gave you enough advice about, and you have to make a decision. And it's a gut-wrenching decision. And so often, the reason we wanted to talk to Denny is because this kind of situation can occur for any of us as we're dealing with a loved one. And, Denny did a wonderful job, as good as he knew how to do at that point in time. And, unfortunately, that was a turning point for Kay's health. But
I
sure,
think
go ahead,
Steve
Denny.
was immeasurably helpful in the encouragement and in that small group that he set up. Because I'll tell you what, just having that there, having other men to see that they're going through the same thing. I can't thank you enough, Steve, for what you've done and how you're still doing it too, with new men coming in. And some of the old guys like myself are not as we're just not there as much. And I sort of find myself, kind of falling away because I'm not in the position where a lot of these guys are. And yet Steve has stayed right there in the course. And I can't thank you enough, Steve.
Well, that's very kind of you. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up here. Thank you all for your willingness to listen to a great friend and a great caregiver, Denny Barker. And we look forward to hopefully having you listen to future podcasts for Spotlight on Care. And we're hoping to continue this process. And we will have a bunch of new topics. So please check back on the website on a regular basis, as we'll be adding new podcasts, every month, maybe even every week. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Steve.
Spotlight on Care is produced by the University of California, Irvine Institute for Memory Impairments and Neurological Disorders, UCI Mind. Interviews focus on personal caregiving journeys and may not represent the views of UCI Mind. Individuals concerned about cognitive disorders, prevention, or treatment should seek expert diagnosis and care. Please subscribe to the Spotlight on Care podcast wherever you listen. For more information, visit mind.uci.edu.